Jessica Marinos, the author of Traiven's Past, the first in a medieval trilogy. What I would like to discuss in this first video today is the art and the freedom that there can be found in using drafts. Because using drafts is really a foundation and a reassurance that writing does not have to be overwhelming. So what I'm going to do in this video is take a paragraph through a 4-draft cycle and hopefully prove that using drafts is effective and can bring ease to your writing. To be quite honest, I was not always a fan of drafting. In my schooling, I was homeschooled, and my mom had my sister and I write in abundance, which now I'm so thankful for. So for example, we would go on field trips to the Hammond Castle on the Massachusetts coast, or the quaint Blackberry Bakery, or Endicott Park, where we would then return home, where we would write about our adventures. But I never wanted to write this in drafts. I wanted it to come out perfect my first time through. And then again in later years, as I entered into college and wrote many 10-page research paper, I had that same tendency. But then when I came to face the magnitude of writing a novel, with writing one phenomenal paragraph after one remarkable paragraph after one superb paragraph right off the bat, that was daunting. And would make one feel more like they wanted to take a nap than press through and face this challenge. So I came to the point where, all right, I was going to embrace using drafts. And when I did, I was so freed. I was amazed. So when I did embrace, that meant for me getting sloppy, writing rough drafts, not caring how it comes out, not caring if I use cliches, not caring if they were weak verbs, just so I could get my thoughts out. And it doesn't matter what it looks like in a first draft. That's all it is. It's just whatever comes out. There's no block in that. There's no, it's just free flowing. But once you have that rough draft, it doesn't even have to be that good, but from there it gives you a foundation to then go and do your second draft, which all that has to be is make your rough draft a little bit better, and then your third draft only has to be a little bit better than your second, and your fourth a little bit better. So instead of starting from nothing to leaping to this amazing paragraph, in using drafts, you can take these little easy steps, which makes writing quite manageable and enjoyable. Traiven's Past took me 7 drafts, and I think that's because it was the first in a trilogy and my first novel. So there was a lot to map out in regard to both the story itself and finding my method as a writer. Now, as I'm writing the sequel, The King's City, I think it will only take 4 drafts because of all I've learned. And now as I've perfected using drafts in my personal writing, my second book is going so much smoother, so much easier to write. And so finding that method is what has inspired me to produce this video. So let's get to that practical example. For that, we need our paragraph, which I have taken from Traiven's Past. It's the opening paragraph of chapter 24. I'm going to pretend like I haven't written the rest of the chapter, but just know the outline. So I know the events that are going to be included in this chapter, but not how they're going to unfold paragraph by paragraph. So let me just give you what would be in my mind as I would be coming into this opening paragraph, writing it in a rough draft. It's from Lydia. She is my female protagonist. It's written in first person, so it's going to be from her perspective, not mine or any of the other characters. The setting is a castle banquet hall, so that's a really intriguing setting to draw from. What's going on in this banquet hall is a feast, and there's going to be confrontation and boldness and tension in this feast. So that mood is something I'll definitely want to draw at some point into this first paragraph to set it up for those events to unfold, but something I'm not going to think about in this rough draft. Is something we'll get to later on. And then Lydia's position, which I see not her starting off down in the banquet hall, but 3 stories up, overlooking from a balcony. So she has an aerial view as the guests are coming in to the banquet hall for that feast. So Lydia's going to have some probably description of what she's seeing before she descends down herself. So we're going to start with our rough draft. Now, I write all my rough drafts in notebook handwritten form. For me, that's just always been more freeing. I like the old-fashionedness of it. So let's go ahead and take a look at what that paragraph will look like in a rough draft form.
Here is our rough draft example. Let's go ahead and read it together. From the third floor balcony, I looked down over the banquet hall, which flooded with people here for the feast. I was nervous because I knew the people down there didn't like me, but like it or not, I would soon have to descend.
So as you see, a rough draft can be very plain, very basic, very freeing. Now, as I would be coming into writing a second draft, I would begin to think about how to incorporate the senses. What does Lydia feel? What does she hear? What does she see? What does she smell? And this will bring in more of a picture of our setting. And again, I'm still not going to be thinking about writing technique, just bringing in more elements. So at this point, I would move what I've written in my notebook to my computer. So let's go ahead and take a look at what this rough draft could now look like in a second draft form. We have now moved to a Word document for our second draft example. Let's read it. From the third floor balcony, I looked down over the banquet hall, which was flooded with people. Minstrels played and gestures amused the crowd before the feast. The smell of the waiting foods wafted to my nose. All the tables were set, and the chandeliers shined like twinkling stars. I was nervous because I knew the people down there didn't like me, but like it or not, I would soon have to descend. So as you can see, we have now integrated all the senses from our setting, and so now that we have all of our elements gathered that we are going to use for this paragraph, it's time to begin working on our writing style, which I see we have a lot of problems with in the second draft, which is exactly what a second draft is supposed to have. But now as we would come into our third draft, it's time to make those corrections. So to help us in that third draft, let's point out those problems that should be fixed. From the third floor balcony, I looked. Looked is a very weak verb. We could definitely find a stronger one. Down over, I think upon be a better choice here. It's more medieval time period sounding. The banquet hall, which was flooded. Flooded is a very overused verb. We would do well to switch that up. With people, generic. We could find something more specific. Minstrels played and gestures amused the crowd before the feast. Not bad in itself, but something to keep in mind. Maybe we could make that a little more engaging. The smell of the waiting foods. That's just awkward. Awkwardly worded. Wafted, I don't even know why I use wafted. It does not appear in any of my writings. It's just one of those words I'm not very fond of for some reason. To my nose, that would not appear in my book either. It's just comical sounding to me. All the tables were set. That tells me nothing. But I think we could come up with a sentence that was more a visual substance. And the chandeliers shine like twinkling stars. Ooh, that sounds like a nursery rhyme. We will be modifying that. I was nervous. I'm confident that we could find a way to show Lydia's nervous either through her movements or her thoughts instead of boringly just coming out and saying I was nervous. I think the same would apply to people down there didn't like me. We could better creatively show that. Oh, what I'm also seeing is I have a like here, and a like here. So 3 likes in succession, which is not a good idea. I would most definitely eliminate at least 2 of those. I also see that I have a sentence starting with the conjunction here and here. While it is acceptable today to start sentences with conjunctions, it's still wise to use them sparingly. So I would take one of those out. So it may seem a little daunting to have so much highlighted, but now that we know what we need to fix, it will be much easier as we go down to a third draft to make those corrections. So now here is our third draft, and let's see how we have incorporated our highlights. From the third floor balcony, I stared down upon the prepared banquet hall, which swelled with hundreds of guests. All appeared happy with the music of minstrels and the amusements of the jesters. The aroma of the prepared feast filled the air as the food spread across the many stately tables. The lit chandeliers were a sparkle of light over everything otherwise dull. But it was not safe for me down there. I waited nervously as any moment Danik would come and escort me down. So as you see, we changed looked to stared over to upon, swelled instead of flooded, guests rather than people. All appeared happy, so this brings the mood, at least what it appeared to be. But there is a better word to use than happy, or a better phrase that can imply that. With the music of minstrels and the amusement of the jesters, what I'm seeing here is we have a repetition of minstrels, of jesters up here, of guests down here, of feast. So that's a little redundant to have all those right after the other. So I would at least try to omit two of those. Ooh, filled. That's another weak verb. The airs, the food spread across the many stately tables. It's a little more visual, as you can see it spread in stately tables. And prepared feast is much better than waiting foods. The lit chandeliers were a sparkle of light over everything otherwise dull. Not so nursery rhyme, thankfully. And we got rid of our likes. That's good. We only have one sentence that starts with a conjunction now. These still could, two sentences use a little bit of work. But as you can see, we've made a lot of those corrections. It's more smooth sounding flow as we read it. But as our next segment will prove, that we can take an okay third draft and transform it into a magnificent final draft. I would say that our third draft isn't bad, but nor is it phenomenal. So when we come into our final draft, this is the final push for that excellence and polish and shine. This is where wordsmithing comes in, where we agonize over every word and we analyze our sentence structures. This is actually my favorite aspect of the writing process because it's where your work starts to shine and you like it and it gets exciting. And I'm sure you would experience that as well in your own writing. It's also the most time-consuming process. I've been known to spend up to several hours wordsmithing one paragraph, but don't be discouraged. Not every paragraph takes that long, and it is well worth the time, as you will see. It just brings that extra reality and just feel and aliveness to your work. So I'm not going to go too much in detail on wordsmithing in this video. I'm going to do a video just on that aspect devoted to wordsmithing and a video specifically on outlining. So if those interest you, they're coming up. But what I do want to mention on wordsmithing here, because I use it in my final draft in this paragraph, is, like I said before, this chapter, there's confrontation, there's boldness and tension, and now's the time to draw in that feel. So what I would often do, is think of an element of nature that has that danger, tension feel. So I thought of a beehive, because what's more dangerous and stirring than to find yourself in the midst of that? And as we can see, we'll see, that gave me strong words to incorporate in this paragraph that did create the mood, not only of what Lydia's feeling and what the setting is, but what's stirring in the people and the crowd below. So let's go ahead and read that final draft to see what we've got. Here is our final draft as it appears in final print. Chapter 24, Lydia. From the third floor balcony, I stared down upon the prepared banquet hall, which resonated like an active hive with hundreds of roused guests.
On the surface, the tone below was jovial, with the minstrels and gestures amusing the crowd before the feast, the aromas of the anticipated foods, the stately set tables, and the ablaze chandeliers. Nonetheless, my instinct felt the hidden stings poised under each tongue, the whisperings behind women's fans, and their critical expectancy, eyeing the stairs where Danik and I would soon descend. Yes, with this I am well pleased. Now, after we have done the wordsmithing, we can sense the danger, we feel Lydia's nervousness, we see that this is a deceptive joy that's emanating from the feast when there's really hidden stings and whisperings and critical expectancy. So those strong words, well placed, really bring the reader into the setting and the mood, like the resonated, the roused, surface, jovial instead of happy, aromas, ablazed, poised, critical expectancy. And then, as we use the analogy of the beehive to bring in the danger, you have active hive, again, the roused, the aromas, which bees are always attracted to, it seems, instinct, stings. So this beautifully sets up the intensity of this chapter. And now we can see that you can go from a sloppy copy rough draft to refinement.
One last thought I would like to share with you is don't feel like you have to box yourself in the number of drafts that you use, because in doing so, you could cut yourself and your work short. So use as many drafts as you feel until you've reached that place that your work is remarkable and you feel satisfied. Because drafting is meant to help bear the weight and to make writing easier, not to confine you. So use drafting in abundance. Like I said, Traiven's Pass took me 7 drafts. Well, I hope this video has been helpful, and the video on wordsmithing and outlining are on their way. In the meantime, be inspired to write. Farewell.